Okay, we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to A Blether with Russell and myself from the Inverurie Whisky Shop. Tonight we have got a great guest, following on from the string of great guests we're getting at the moment. Alistair Walker from the kind of really highly regarded Infrequent Flyers, independent bottling. Really excited to have Alistair with us. Straight off the bat, we've got David saying good evening. Good evening, David. Nice to have you along. What have you been up to, Russell?
Yeah, so day off for me today, so that was quite nice. So I've been up on the Murray Coast. Rachel had her first paddle board. I can never get the right kind of technical term for it. She had her first lesson today, so went up with her, and I took the dog along for a walk along the beach at Sand End, looking longingly across to Glendronach. So everybody's a little bit weather beaten with the sea air. So yeah, it's been a good day. I hear it's been quite busy in the shop.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but whenever me and Annette are on the shop floor, it's busy, but there's always weird and wonderful other things happen. We have recs come in, we have deliveries come in, we have our DPD deliveries and all that, and it's all weird and wonderful stuff. It's never just customers, customers are great. So
that's what we want. It's all the other stuff.
Yeah, it's all the crap that goes on in the background you have to deal with. It's every time it just seems to be when me and Annette are on, it's like such a stop-start day. So it's been pretty hectic. It's been warm. It's been muggy. So I'm looking forward to just getting a glass.
You need a steady hand of Janice to steady the ship, and I'm trying to be Janice's apprentice. I'm trying to bring that calmness to the shop floor at the same time.
Yeah. So Janice is back from holiday next week, so that will hopefully settle everything down. But hey, let us say we can't complain. We had the Tor of Egg released today, the Legacy 2.
Saw that on Facebook.
That was in the shop for I don't know, but less than half an hour anyway, in and out.
Yes.
I don't even know why we bother unpacking some of the boxes sometimes. But that's the nature of the beast nowadays. Yeah. It's absolutely flying. So a couple of guys to say hello to: Evangelist, Phil, David. Great to have you along.
Good to see you, Dan. Haven't seen you for a while, mate. Maybe see you and by the shop sometime soon, hopefully.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let us know what's in your glass, as always. If you're pouring, even if it's a beer or a gin, or if it's not whiskey.
Give everybody a try and guess what's in here.
Is that you trying to fob Coca-Cola off? That's
the heaviest sherry dram you've ever seen in your life. Known as Pepsi Cola. Yeah. Other colas are available.
If you have got one of the Infrequent Flyers, do let us know. Let us know what you think of it. They've been a really good range for us. We'll talk about it. We'll get Alistair on. He's sitting in the green room just now, waiting to come in. So let's welcome Alistair to the.
It's a well stocked green room by the look of it. It's got a nice there.
Good evening, guys.
Good evening, Alistair. Thanks for coming along and joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
I'm going to turn on the light down here. There we go. It's a bit brighter. You might not want to see me actually in the brighter. So David's got a Glenallachie batch 5. Good stuff. Keep an eye out for batch 6. It will be with us imminently, David, if you haven't already got that one ordered. Phil's on the gluten-free IPA, Glenfiddich IPA.
Yeah.
Glenfiddich IPA, I expect that.
Glenfiddich IPA, yeah.
The experimental season. Great stuff. Really nice dram, actually. Great for a half and half if you fancy a wee dram at the bar. Knowing David's. Oh, it's Phil that's got. I was going to say, knowing David's pours, it'll be about a half pint for the. So, Alistair, let's say welcome to our Blether. Thanks very much for joining us, giving up your time on the Thursday night to come and have a chat. We say to everyone, relax, pour yourself a dram or a drink of the good old H2O, as I believe you're on tonight. It's just relax. Feel free to tell any stories and have a wee laugh with us and the guys. Guys, feel free to ask any questions that you might have for Alistair or ourselves. We're just here to get the big guns on on the live, so we very rarely get any questions, but any questions come up for us, we'll try and answer. So Alistair, you've been in whiskey for quite a while. Infrequent Flyers is your first kind of independent venture. How did the transition from working under a kind of umbrella company to working for yourself? How did that all come about?
That's a great question. And what a difference between. I kind of feel like it's like gamekeeper turned poacher. You know, I spent. I was at Inverurie for 12 years, and before that with Burn Stewart for about 6.5. So 18.5 years working for distilleries, and then suddenly you're on the other side of the fence, and it's completely different. And it's not. I never kind of when I left Inverurie, I didn't really know what I was going to do next. To be honest, I kind of find that it was never that. I kind of thought when I was working at Inverurie that I'd be working at Inverurie for like 30, 40 years, but things happen, things come out of the blue that you never anticipate. So I found myself in. It was a good situation, but thinking, right, what am I going to do for the for the rest of my life? And I knew that my dad was. I mean, I'm sure all the folk watching are familiar with the connection with Billy, who's my father, and Inverurie and Glendronach and Glenalachie and all that stuff. So I knew that my dad was going to get involved in another distillery at some point, and it was just this kind of, do I want to do that or do I want to go and try something else? And I just had this urge to have a crack at something on my own. I mean, I knew Glenalachie would have been a really good project, but I felt that I'd kind of done that for 12 years. And it would have been more of a challenge to go and do something different. So setting up your own thing in whiskey, independent bottling seemed like the obvious choice because it's kind of it's a way to get in without investing a huge amount in a distillery, either building one from scratch or buying one, both of which are monumentally expensive projects to undertake. Whereas independent bottling, the thing is, can you get some stock? Even if it's just one cask, you're off and running. But it was getting into a side of the, when I worked with Inverurie, I was purely on the sales and marketing side. So we had other people in the background that went away and made the whiskies and dealt with bulk and bottling and packaging, and we got the finished product to go out and sell, which is probably the easy part. And now you're on the other side of it. You're trying to go out and source casks and arrange everything, from getting the liquid from the starting point to the end point, which is quite complicated at times.
Yeah. Was it a bit like, I mean, a lot of people say when they work with family, and lots of people do work with family, but you end up being so-and-so's son or so-and-so's daughter, or was it a bit like, Billy's son all the time? It'd be nice to actually go and be Alistair and to be known for yourself and what you do.
Probably a bit of that. I mean, I think that's always there, subconsciously maybe. I didn't. I mean, if you take Inverurie as an example, by the time we had moved through to Newbridge, where we had our bottling plant, the company had become, by the time we bought Glendronach, the company had become quite a big business. So when we started off, there was maybe like 7 or 8 of us all working in the one room, and my old man was like 10 meters away, so I couldn't get away from him. But by the time we got through to Newbridge, and we were all spread out all over the building. So we had our own little sales division, and Billy wasn't even on the same floor, so that was good. He also had. He had always been very heavily involved in the commercial side of even going out and selling bottles at the start of the business. But once we got to a point where there was myself and another guy looking after the sales when it was still quite small, he really just stepped back, which is great because it allows us to just crack on and do our own thing, and he didn't interfere too much in that side of it. So you did have that autonomy, and he just focused on the kind of running the business and the production side of it, making the liquid. So he wasn't kind of always on top of you, but I suppose, to come back to the original question, there was maybe a little bit a part of me that wanted to just go out and do it without his involvement,
Mhm.
I mean, he takes the business side of it so seriously. So I don't suppose you would have been given any leeway just because of being his son. That probably, if anything, he would have been harder on you.
Much. Yeah, you definitely get treated differently, but not always in a good way.
Yeah.
I hope he's watching.
They always say it's worse if you're a football player and your manager's the father. You're the one that gets
Aye, exactly.
the hardest kind of time. Yeah.
I mean, we could talk about the football if you want to.
I don't know. I'm not in a football mood at the moment.
we were talking. We had Billy on maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago. I don't think it was on the live. I think it was in the pre-chat.
It was before. Yeah.
So Russell and I are both dandies, and we're saying we're really not looking forward to this season. Stephen Glass has got no pedigree, and I just can't see the team coming together. And we say, Billy, you must be really confident. Everything's going really well. So 4 weeks later, it's like you guys are out of the Champions League, and it's like we're on a great winning run. It's like, it's all good now.
You're only ever 2 weeks away from a crisis in Scottish football.
Absolutely.
And probably
as we did say that night, we leave football and politics out of whiskey chats and tastes. That's for another time.
Absolutely.
We'll sneak it in before we get popped into the jam. So,
well, I think Aberdeen are playing tonight, are they not?
They are, yes. Yeah, we're at home. Well, all four sort of also rans are playing tonight. Celtic, Hibs, Aberdeen, and St Johnstone. I think so.
Yeah, because I think the St Johnstone game's on the BBC.
BBC, that's right. Yeah.
We're all in pretty good positions as well. All four teams are looking decent. I mean, St Johnstone's result.
It can only go wrong. It's Scottish football. Yeah.
Was unbelievable, and I was laughing because I was watching it, and Richard Foster's saying, "Oh, they should be pushing for the victory." And I'm like, I know because they had like an extra man, and I'm thinking, if you get a one each draw in Turkey, you're doing pretty well.
That's right. Absolutely. Anybody would take that. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just a pity the away goal didn't count. So.
I know that would have been a bonus.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll roll back into football, into the whiskey. We've got Alistair's back and joining us, and Ross Jolly. Good evening, guys. Nice to have you along. Van's on the Glencadam 13.
Nice van. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any whiskies that you haven't bottled yet that you would love to get your hands on, or how do you select the whiskies?
Another good question. I think a lot of independent bottlers will probably echo what I'm about to say. You're always looking for variety, and that can be variety in terms of distilleries or age profile or style of whiskey, and even price point. You want a good range of price points, so you're making your selection open to a wide range of people. But the overarching thing in all of that is that it has to be stuff that you like, and I mean that more in terms of quality than style. What I've kind of set out to try, I want to get access to stock from as many distilleries as I possibly can, and I've got a list that's kind of split into a number of columns, and it's like these are the distilleries that we do have stock of. These are the ones that we will never get stock of for various reasons. There's probably a half a dozen distilleries that you would never, you just wouldn't get. I mean, Glenfiddich, Balvenie, Glenfarclas have got their very strict kind of philosophy about allowing their whiskey to be used by anybody. And then there's things that have over the last 4 to 5 years become financially challenging, like Lafroig and Ardbeg and Springbank and Glendronach, for sure. So there's these ones that are probably unattainable. There's ones that we've got, and then there's this section in the middle which are our target makes. And Glendronach's an interesting one because when I left the Benriach company, I didn't know I was going on to do this. So it's not like I had transferred multiple casks of whiskey.
Rolled a couple of casks into the back cupboard.
No, there was nothing like that. And the funny thing with Glendronach, when we bought the distillery, that would have been 2008. And one of the first things that Billy did was to stop any filling contracts. So, and it was different to Benriach. Benriach was a much bigger distillery in terms of capacity. So you had filling contracts with other distillers. Whereas Glendronach, it was just like, we're not doing that. Everything that we make, we're keeping under our own roof. Mm-hmm. So from 2008 onwards, no stock of Glendronach made its way outside the distillery, which means that, that's 13 years ago, anything that was kicking about on the kind of open market is probably gone. So it means that it's almost impossible to get casks of Glendronach, and you will see the same thing with Glenallachie in a few years' time, because I don't think that they're selling, not selling me any.
I only live a few miles away from Glendronach, so I could start building the tunnel under the warehouse, and we could.
I think that's the only chance, and it's a shame because if there was one whiskey that I would love to bottle a cask of, partly because it's so unattainable, it would be Glendronach, but also because I've got that history with the distillery, and that big sherry cask style, which is something that I really like. So yeah, that if something like that cropped up, but ultimately when you're choosing casks, it's really about quality, but also trying to tick all those other boxes so that you're not continually bringing the same thing over and over and over again. I always try when we're doing a new batch to make sure there's at least one or two distilleries in there that are new to the range. Eventually that will become impossible because we'll get to a point where we've done so many that it's becoming harder and harder to get access to new distilleries, but we'll see.
Do you get access to, or have you had access to any of the new distilleries, your Ardnamarkens or your Daft Mills?
A couple. I hadn't really been too bothered about that at first because it's weird psychologically. If you're going to these guys, you're probably looking at buying new make, and then suddenly you're thinking, well, I'm going to buy this liquid, and I'm going to just have to forget about it for maybe 7 or 8 years, maybe longer. And I couldn't get my head around that, thinking that far ahead. So I hadn't bothered with that, but this year I started looking at it, and I approached a few and managed to get some stock from maybe a few, maybe 3 or 4 of them. I don't want to name any. Well, there's one that I will name because they already put it out on there. They were quite open about publicising what they were doing, so managed to pick up some casks from Holyrood, which is quite interesting what they're doing. One of the unusual things there was when they actually approached me and said, look, we kind of like what you're doing, and it would be quite cool if you could buy some stock. And then I said, look, I won't bottle that for years. And they said, no, it's fine. But it'll be a nice story when it happens. But what was quite interesting there was that they actually allow you to kind of choose what direction the spirit's going to go in before they make it. So there's different things you can do in terms of the type of barley and the type of distillation. So you can go to them and say, well, I'd like this. I'd like something that's going to end up like this. What can you do? Because not normally, we just get like this. It would be just, here's some new make, and you'll take what you get.
Yeah. Do you often deal with new make then, or is that?
Say again?
Do you often deal with new make, or is that something that's?
No, it's very limited. And as I say, we've only only started doing it this year, and it's some of the stuff's in quite interesting wood already, which is it's going to be interesting to see how that works out, because that's very early, to some of the wood that we're using on some of these new makes are quite kind of punchy, if you like, and they're going to have a long time in that type of wood. So that'll be interesting to see how that evolves. And it's funny because these things exist for me now on a spreadsheet. I can't think about them because they're not options that I can do anything with for such a long time. So you just need to kind of park them and maybe draw the odd sample, but just put it as something for further down the road.
Talking of interesting wood, the one I just poured is the sample of your Brackla.
Oh, that was good.
Recent, the Chinkapin.
That's nice. It's funny. I'm not sure that Chinkapin is as understood as it maybe should be, because my old man loves Chinkapin oak, and the only reason I got access to any of that wood was because they were bringing some in, and he raves about it, and I thought, well, if he thinks it's that good, I need to get in on it. But it's one of those ones where it's kind of annoying because you know yourself how good it is, but it's not. I don't think it's quite caught the public's imagination just yet. If it was a sherry cask, no problem. But
it's Chinkapin quite. It's also quite hard to work with, isn't it? It's not. It's
well,
not as straightforward as some of those.
I know my old man says that he's probably he probably draws samples more frequently than I do, and they're very specific about when they're going to take that particular whiskey and bottle it. With me, there's probably a limit to how many casks I'm going to bottle each year. So some of my Chinkapin liquid, it might stay in there a little bit longer than they would keep it. But I'm always, I don't get too bothered about that. I kind of think that it's interesting to see how these things go over a period of time, and what you end up with is probably going to be pretty decent, whether you do it after a year or 3 years or 5 years. It's just going to be different.
So I think at Glenallie, Chinkapin was the first handful that they released, wasn't it, when they opened the visitor centre?
Listen, it might be. You guys probably know more about that than I do.
They had the sherry. They had the sherry butt. They had the sherry butt and the Chinkapin the day I went up.
Same time,
Both of those, yeah.
But at that time, we were on an event, and the master distiller who was on, I won't name names, but they were saying they'd never heard of Chinkapin.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's like, what is this? This kind of brand new oak that it's quite similar to American oak. It is an American oak.
It's a style of American oak.
Yeah. So it's not a brand new oak or anything. It's just, and we
hundreds of years old. It's been growing since millennia. I think the dinosaurs might have seen some of it perhaps at some point in time.
But is it not? They were speaking. No, there's probably been casks in Chinkapin or Muhlenbergie, however you want to say it, but we just didn't know it was just classed as American oak.
Yeah, no doubt, and I think that's something that has happened throughout the industry, where there was a lot of people would have been using sherry casks and port casks at certain points, but nobody was talking about it because there wasn't really a place for that discussion. And it's evolved so much over the last 20 years, where on one hand, consumers want to know more information about how the whiskey's made, and producers are seeing an opportunity to say, well, actually, some of the things we are doing are things we should be talking about more because they're real selling points. And I think sherry cask is probably the best example of that. It's been such an explosion. And I sometimes think it's a shame because it can be to the detriment of other styles.
Yeah, definitely.
But we've had that conversation, and we often talk about it's not just your own whiskey, but every independent bottling that we get in, and we we pop up, look who's back, so and so sort of, and the range goes up, and the one that's that colour sells out before it hits the shelf, and then the rest, take a bit of time. And Mike and I try really, really hard to promote the other stuff because we feel that deserves, if not as much attention, perhaps more attention, because a lot of those whiskies are absolutely fantastic.
You're a picture behind you that I've deliberately masked the.
Yeah, you can't see it. It's gone.
You can't see the
I
one.
think that was a Glenrothes in that one.
I think it was. I think it was a Glenrothes. But
a great example, Russell, of what you were saying there. I think it was the last release we did, and I'm speaking as somebody. If I walked into a bar to buy a whiskey, my go-to would not be a peated malt. That's not my initial choice. But on that last batch, to me, the absolute standout whiskey was the peated Glenturret, the Ruard Moor that had been in the Marsala cask. But I know that it has been one of the slower sellers. But to me, I'm sitting doing the tasting notes, and even when we did the cask selection, I'm like, this is amazing. This has absolutely blown me away. But I know that the Milton Duff is going to be the one that's going to fly because it's PX. So
yeah. I can't remember. It was I won't name brands, but there was a recent bottling. I've got it in my head. But there was a Chinkapin that was cherry. It was dark. Now we've got Chinkapin on the shelf all over the place. That's bourbon. It's clear. It's yellow. It's straw. And it takes a while to get people. People don't really know the distillery, so it's one of these ones that is hard to sell. But I just knew as soon as I saw the range and there was a dark Chinkapin and it went. And it's like, I bet you the people that have bought that's the first time they've ever had a bottle of Chinkapin because they've just bought it because it's dark. Yeah. But again, that's a fantastic whiskey. I've had 2 or 3 bottles of that. I absolutely love it. I mean, the vanillas and the coconuts that come out of that, it's fantastic. But yeah, the other thing as well is the name, and I think in your last release you had the Ben Nevis, which disappeared as well. So it's one of these ones that if it's a name that's got that kind of cult following and that kind of unicorn distillery.
It's funny. I don't think I'd realised quite how popular Ben Nevis was.
Neither did Mike. I came in and I said, that's all gone. I said, a guy's just bought 3 of them. He said, yeah. I said, why is that not one per person? He said, why should I have done that? I said, it's Ben Nevis, Mike. Yeah.
I mean, I've always liked Ben Nevis, but just because my old man had given me a couple of bottles that quite often he'll get stuff and he'll half of it'll end up with me. And I'd been kind of working my way through this bottle of Ben Nevis for some time, and so I was quite happy to get some casks, but I hadn't realised that it had such a big following. And that was the one of that release, that the Ben Nevis was a smaller outturn, but that was the one everybody was, there's not enough, can we get some more? And
massive follow for Ben Nevis. I'm in a couple of other kind of sort of tasting clubs, if you like, riotous clubs, it should really be called. But we've had Ben Nevis Part 1 and Part 2, and they both, you've got to say to the guy before it comes out, make sure I get a ticket for that, because as soon as he puts them on sale, they're just sold out straight away. It's an odd distillery because it's not. I find it's a very weird whiskey. I always said it's one of these whiskies you've got to be ready to have a punch up with, because it's kind of really rough and ready, but it's rough and ready in a way that you want to take it on. It's a weird whiskey. Yeah.
You said us on the shop, it was like having a fight with your older brother.
Your older brother when he pins you, and you can't quite get up. It's like, oh, get off me. That's right.
Right enough. But yeah, so I mean, I thought the Crofton Gia, which I'll be tasting later, I thought we still got a couple of bottles left. I thought that would go, but again, I think not knowing the distillery name, it's that getting that.
You definitely find that Crofton Gia. That's the second cask we've bottled. The first one was in the original wood. Would have been a refill hogshead, and that was a nice surprise. Very sweet, kind of floral whiskey. Maybe not what you'd expect from a peated Loch Lomond, and it was great. And then, but again, both of those casks were a bit of a challenge, I think, to sell. purely because of the crofting gear. People are, what is crofting gear? Whereas I get very excited when I get offered stuff like that, because to me, the weirder and the more obscure, that to me is like a massive selling point. So it shows how out of touch I am with reality.
Well, no, not at all. I think it's just that the average customer, and it's that bit about kind of trying to get people to trust. Because the Crofton Gia, for me, on the shelf just now, is one of the highlights that's there, but it's the price. And because people aren't familiar with what it is, even though I'm saying to them, don't worry about what you're paying, that's a great dram, you'll love it, you'll enjoy it. It's a big step for somebody to take to trust you.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, we've got a lot of guys now that'll come in and just say, just tell me what I should buy. Because everything we've sold them to date has been great, so they trust that. But most customers don't know you well enough to take that kind of leap of faith and say, "Oh no, I'll just go for that Glenfiddich or that a name they know," and that's
yeah.
I think that's the challenge.
We've got a couple of great questions coming in from Phil. I'm not sure if we really covered the. Do you have a cask preference at all? I don't know if Phil, do you mean to work with or to drink? There's kind of maybe two questions in that.
Yeah.
He's also asking, how did you manage to get a hold of a Dumbarton?
Well, that's a good question, that one about the Dumbarton.
Can you tell the story? Are you allowed to?
Does it involve balaclavas and vans and stuff?
I know a guy who I'm sort of closely related to, who hails from Dumbarton, and he stumbled across a couple of casks and was kind enough to put them. Dumbarton is quite difficult to get. I think we might have maybe we've still got some stock, but there's not much. As in future cask bottlings of Dumbarton.
Okay.
And obviously it's closed, it's gone, demolished. So it'll eventually, like Port Dundas, it'll fade out eventually at some point. In terms of cask preferences, I do love working with. I love sherry casks. I love port casks. I love virgin oak. These were a lot of the staple casks that we worked with at Inverurie and Glendronach. And then beyond that, things like Sauterne are very, very nice. They don't always pan out the way that you hope. I think sherry casks are interesting because I can show you two PX casks, and again coming back to colour, and one's the whole Coca-Cola thing, and the other one is quite rich colour, but not that kind of mahogany dark thing that you might expect. And that's quite interesting because they don't always pan out. They don't always look like these incredibly dark things, and that's why it's a shame that the colour becomes so important, because the flavour profile on the lighter ones is fantastic. You're getting a lot of the stuff that you would get, but just without that colour development. A lot of the stuff we've got is quite mixed when you look at how the sherry has influenced the colour. But generally, they're brilliant casks to work with. Very, very reliable. Virgin oak is superb. That was a big basis for a lot of the Inverurie core range bottlings, was Virgin American oak. So really good wood.
Yeah, you had a great Bowmore Virgin oak.
Yeah. It's nice. It's just, you a lot of cash you'll get might be in refill hogsheads, and they're good in first fill ex bourbon barrels, second fill ex bourbons are good, but Virgin oak is just a little bit kind of punchier than those guys. It's like the Bowmore.
Yeah.
That's a nice dram.
I'm just going to say cheerio to David. David's one of our regular guys. His daughter's in a major online bagpiping competition.
It's a good excuse.
So good luck to her, David. Pass her on our best, and we'll maybe see
absolutely.
you.
That's a very Scottish excuse, that, isn't it? To leave.
A major online bagpipe competition.
He's up in Fort William as well, so that's kind of even. How much more Scottish could you get?
Oh yeah.
I didn't even know they had online internet in Fort William. So I hope the signal's strong enough. I assume she just sits at home and plays bagpipes to the telly and the judge. I'm not sure. You'd have to sit outside though, wouldn't you? Bagpipes always sound better outside.
It's all online these days. Everything's online.
Everything's online.
I think it'll continue as well. I think it's certainly something that's come out of it. This is it's chats like this or the online tastings. I think I hope that this kind of opportunity continues.
I think it will, because there a lot of the barriers to doing events that geographical and location and time and distance, these sort of things just take all that out the equation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's good that if you were to come up to a tasting in the shop, there would be travel, accommodation, food and all that kind of thing. But tonight it's just an hour on the laptop.
Yeah.
And then it's a case of close the laptop and that's
well,
back.
A great example on Tuesday morning next week at 10 a.m. We've got I'm on a panel for one of the Australian whisky festivals.
Okay.
And that's, that would be very difficult to get to. So 10 o'clock in the morning, here we go, put on the laptop, an hour, and off you go. So
brilliant. Yeah. So possibilities are endless. So good luck to Sarah. She's actually down in Glasgow. David's watching it at home, I guess, to avoid creating a crowd, I suppose. I've just finished that Chinkapin Royal Brackla, and it's outstanding. It's so fruit. I'm still tasting it just now. A lot of fruit in that. What a dram. I'm an advocate of Chinkapin now. I can't deny it. Since that first taste, any Chinkapin I see, I'm like, yeah, gotta have it. Right, and I believe that there are more and more people coming out with Chinkapin in the future.
Yeah, I've seen a few in the last 2 or 3 years. I think you get that in whiskey. I think there's things that become quite kind of fashionable, and there's topics that become fashionable, and for a period of time, and then something else comes along and takes the limelight.
I'm just going to make Phil a little bit jealous. I've just poured the 22-year-old Dumbarton. You never know. Phil.
He hasn't poured it all. There could be a prize in there somewhere.
This is what we were saying, guys, before we came on the chat. Is we are lucky enough at the shop that we get samples sent almost daily to try, either from guys like yourself, Alistair, who are kind of give us a heads up on what's to come, or people trying to get us to buy in their stock brand new. And there are times, and as I said before we came on live, I hope you take this as a compliment. There are times when your stuff just sells so fast that there's no need to sample it because we don't use that whiskey. So it's not like we have. I've got about.
There's a difference between need. There's a difference between need and want. Sometimes we need to sample to sell. Yeah. Other times we want to. It's like, how can I not get some of that?
But we're talking about tonight. It's like that's a great excuse to delve into the samples I've had lined up. But it is. It's like as soon as we get your stuff in and promoted and sold, the next batch is in, whether it's Morrison Distillers or Douglas Lang or whoever it is. It's like right, sample this stuff, and it's just an ongoing cycle of trying to get the next one in.
And from your point of view, you must see the number of new releases that are coming out in the industry is getting sort of increasing all the time. Yeah,
it's unreal. Yeah,
space shelf's definitely a challenge. And there's definitely there's definitely stuff we we always want to have on the shelf, but you also want to promote other stuff as well. And I guess it's all about how quickly that other stuff then sells. We've got staples. I mean, clearly you're one of the ones that's in there that's a fixture as far as we're concerned now. And other kind of companies will come along. We'll give them a shot. If they don't sell very well, then I guess it's the same as anything. You've got to kind of think, okay, well, let's leave that for a bit. But there's 2 or 3 indies, including yourself, that are definitely stuff we want on the shelf all the time if we can get it to.
Certainly a lot. There's a lot of competition in the independent bottling sector. I mean, I'm obviously quite a new entrant, and even in the time that I've been doing it, there's been a few that have arrived on the scene. Which is to me, there's definitely there's room for everybody, because there's a lot of guys like yourselves out there. We can't sell our product to all of the good whiskey shops in the UK because we don't have enough of it. So we only work with a few. Mm-hmm. The ones that we don't work with will be working with someone else. So there's to me there's a lot of space out there for everybody, and the demand from consumers is just phenomenal. Just for single malt in general, it seems to get more intense every year.
For sure, absolutely. Long may it continue. Long may it continue. So, what would you be doing if you weren't in whiskey, Alistair?
Well, it's funny. My kind of background is like mathematics and finance and really boring.
So you were rescued, then, were you?
Listen, I'll tell you a story. I last. It's funny. I mean, not that I could have done this particular job. I mean, I'd probably ended up being an accountant or something. I'm so glad I'm not. But I got a phone call last April or May, just after lockdown, the first lockdown had started. From I'd get this message on my phone from a journalist at I think it was the Telegraph or something. And I hate talking to. I thought this would be a story about whiskey, and I really don't like talking to the newspapers in case I say the wrong thing. On the odd occasion that I ever get asked to say anything, and curiosity got the better of me, and I phoned this guy back and said, "I'm just returning your call," and he said. I said, what is it about? Is it about whiskey? And he went, no, it's I wanted to ask you about the new boss of MI5. And I'm like, what would I know about the new boss of MI5? He said, well, it was in your mathematics class at university.
Oh, really?
No, I had totally missed this story, and then this was a long time ago. And then he told me the guy's name, and I'm like, I'm going, oh, so he was. I'm kind of thinking. He said he must have had a very interesting career. Well, I've been working away at whiskey. He's been some sort of spy.
he's been a sneaky bugger while you've been working.
Well, yeah, who knows? You never know what you ended up doing. But anyway, wherever we are.
That's a wee claim to fame.
Exactly.
So about that Dumbarton barrels, and so yeah, so.
Just saying hello to John. John's joining us. He's a big Glenallachie fan. So I think he named Karen at the distillery.
Yes.
John won the competition to name Karen's new dog. So he was up there a couple of weeks ago to see them.
Karen actually ran a competition, and the prize was to get to name her dog.
Yeah. Yeah, to give names. So Jigger, I think Jigger was the winning name.
Jigger's quite a good name.
Yeah,
quite a good name.
Correct me. It's a quiet life in Rothes.
So he can't hear us. Oh dear. Maybe that's a good thing, John. We'll save that. Maybe catch up with us later on. I mean, so what's next for Infrequent Flyers?
So this is kind of the calm before the storm. I've been working on the next release, which has now been bottled, and I've actually it's some of it's back there, but you can't see it. So it's all hush hush at the moment. But that's batch 7, which was I think bottled. What month are we in? August. That's probably bottled in June.
Right.
It takes so long. Once we kind of bottle the whiskies up, we then have to sort out the labels, and the labels always take a few weeks. So it's all done. 7. I'm trying to remember 7 casks maybe. We've got another UK exclusive, so it might be 8 for the UK, or 7 or 8. Including, I'm kind of looking at them just now. There are 3 distilleries there that we haven't bottled so far, so that's quite nice. And a good mix of ages and styles and distilleries, and hopefully, I'll probably be getting you guys the information within the next 10 days.
Okay.
So definitely by the end of this month, that stuff should be kind of circulating. Certainly in the UK market. So this is like the calm before the storm. Nice kind of quiet period before I have to do a little bit more work. But already just about to choose the final kind of cask selection for batch 8, which we're going to be bottling in about 3 weeks.
Okay.
So yeah, I've got a short list that just needs to be narrowed down a little bit. And again, they're on samples are on that table somewhere. They're going to get bottled up in September, so they should be available towards the end of October. That'll probably be us for this year. The plan next year is to do a bottling in January, and maybe try and get 4 in next year. We're at a spot now where a lot of the stuff we've been doing in the background in terms of re-racking and purchasing, etc., and re-racking especially, it always takes a bit of time. And it's kind of an ongoing thing. We probably do about 3 re-rack programs a year, and it's just when are those going to be ready? So next year, I'm hopeful that some of those are even more of those are going to come to fruition, which will give us a lot more choices. But then there's also things that you don't know that you'll have next year that you don't have yet. Stuff that you buy that might be good to go. You want to bottle it immediately. So I haven't really. I try and sit down at the start of the year and plan out what are the casks that could be the options for this year. I haven't done that for next year yet, but we'll have to do that soon if we're doing a January bottling. We need to start looking at those around about October time, probably.
Well, on a release, say your release is 6-7 bottles. How many samples would you go through to narrow that down? Is it a ratio, or does it just depend what's available?
There's no kind of set program. You always kind of start off looking at your stock sheet, and you'll kind of start off there and say, right, what do we, based on the ages you want to bottle and the varieties you want to go for, and how long things have been in a certain type of wood, you'll maybe start with a very long list, and then you get that list, and then you say, right, I'm going to look at all these, going to get samples drawn for these, and then start narrowing down, and then you get into that difficult one where maybe you might have 3 casks from the same parcel, same distillery, same age, etc., and you're torn between which is the best one, and they're all so, you're talking about minute differences, and then one day this one seems better, but then on Tuesday this one seems better. Yeah. So you go back and forward on it, and then just pick one. But yeah, so there's always there's a long process, and there'll be things that I've looked at, on multiple occasions. So that's not ready yet. I'm going to come back to it in 6 months, and it might be better then, and or different or whatever. So there is quite a process of elimination that goes on. One of the things that I do, or I have done over the last 2 years, is to try and relocate as many of the casks that I've got up to Glendronach. Don't get me wrong, Billy charges me what is definitely the going rate for weekly
absolutely sure that he does. We've heard other stories from other people with the sister companies and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But what the good thing about having one of the many advantages of having the stock all in that location under the one roof is that I probably get access to the samples more quickly than I would if they were somewhere else. Because getting samples can take quite a long time. Okay. These guys turn them around really quickly, and that's hugely beneficial when you're trying to plan what you're going to bring out.
Your relationship with the warehouseman must be it's a special one. I guess Lindsay's one of the best, really, isn't he? So yeah.
Top guy.
Yeah.
Lindsay's probably the person I speak to most up at the distillery. Whether we're doing a re-rack, because we do all our re-racks up at Glendronach, if we're doing a re-rack, or if we're doing samples, or if I'm pulling forward casks to go down for bottling, he's kind of the guy that's on top of all of that. And that's brilliant, because that's a big advantage that a lot of independent bottlers might not have. They might not have their own warehouse, or they might not have such a close relationship with one particular location. I remember when we did the first bottling we did back in the summer of 2019, and it was 9 casks, and I think had to draw them in from 6 or 7 different locations, and you end up spending an absolute fortune on transport. And there was one cask that came from a Thrusk distillery. I don't think it was a Thrusk, but that's where it was sitting.
Okay.
And that one cask alone was like £200 just to move it on its Todd down to the bottler. And then, of course, you don't know when they're all going to arrive. They all came in at different times, so everything was staggered. Whereas now, everything is sitting in the one place. So when we go to do a bottling, it's just one manoeuvre from Alaki to the bottler. I keep telling my dad he should build a bottling plant up at the distillery.
It's been talked about. I think it's been
plenty of room up there. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We had a great single cask line at Newbridge down in Edinburgh with Ben Riach, and that was a busy line because we did so many of our own single casks, whether it was Glendronach or Ben Riach or Glenglassaugh. Very labour intensive, although, because everything was hand numbered and hand labelled and all that kind of thing. So, but yeah, I mean, that was a brilliant little operation.
Mm-hmm. I'll just say to Phil, you know, on the Dumbarton, I think
he's making everybody jealous tonight. Win friends and influence people.
Yeah, it wasn't that great. I'll keep this to myself.
I was going to ask, when you're going through that process and it's like, oh, just pick one. Do you have anybody else that you get to kind of give you their thoughts on that, or do you pull anybody else into?
No, I remember when I first started.
I was just turning for a job there, by the way. That was.
I tried to rope my old man in at the start on. It wasn't so much that I was picking cask to bottle, but I bought some stock and I was trying to get his opinion on what to do with it in terms of what type of wood you think we should put this in and put that in. And I'd hoped that might have become a more regular contribution, but he's a very busy man. So eventually I thought, oh, you know what, I'll just do it myself. And it's one of those things, you know yourself, the more time you spend drinking and tasting whiskey, the more comfortable you get around it, and you're more confident in your own opinions. Now, one of the fallbacks of working on your own is you are not always correct. You know, it is nice to get other people's thoughts on it, but for the time being, it's a one-man band, so it's kind of down to me.
You seem to be doing all right. I was just wondering about Billy's consultation fee. It might have been a little bit exorbitant. So
I think that one that was lost in the post. Now he's in the Hall of Fame and all this, you know.
Well, indeed, absolutely.
His prices have gone through the
only Messi's earning more.
Exactly.
Time for family dinner and just say, go and have a wee taste of that and let me know.
Do you know, he's good though. He's good though. Every now and again, he'll drop by the house and he'll have a stash of either new products that they've released or some whiskey that they're working on, and he'll be like, oh, you know, here, take that, or have a go at that. See what you think of that. I mean, he turned up with the new rums. The other day, which I've not had a chance yet to get right into them, but I quite like rum, so quite curious to have a wee go at those.
Yeah, I think he mentioned a wee while ago in one of the live chats that he was experimenting with rum, and everyone just assumed it was rum cask whiskey.
Whiskey, yeah.
When it came out as a rum, it's like, oh wow, that's quite unexpected. It doesn't seem like you haven't had the chance to try them yet.
I've not had a chance either. I've got a sample set from Spirit Embassy that I was supposed to be on last week before I succumbed to the lurgy, so I'll give them a go at some point.
It's certainly it's an interesting departure for them. It's something that a lot of independent bottlers do. I've been offered rums and I just don't know enough about it to kind of get involved at this point. I wouldn't know what I was buying or if I was paying the right amount for it. But I think it's an interesting category. I think it's quite cool that they're getting involved in it as well. So
it's certainly a growing category. I think everyone for the last, certainly since I've been in the trade, I've just coming for 20 years now. it's always been seen as the next big thing.
Yep.
But it's never quite got there. There's always something else that's just kind of jumped in. The last kind of notable one, and so yeah, I think it's starting to get forward. It's starting to grow. I don't think it'll hit the heights of what gin has done recently, or single malts has done. But hopefully,
gin's got a far broader audience. I think that's the difference. I mean, rum is almost as niche. It's probably a little bit more niche than whiskey, but definitely a much bigger following. And a lot of people are coming in and maybe buying a bottle of whiskey and a bottle of rum because they see the similarities. And some of the rums are almost kind of having that because they're aged in whiskey a lot of the time. A lot of people are saying it's almost like a type of whiskey. So,
it's it's a whole new category, and within the rum category, there's so many categories of rum. More so than whiskey, where you've got kind of 5, maybe 6 different rum. Rum is incredible.
I think there's so much knowledge you would need to have to kind of get into it properly. It's like whiskey, if you were starting off from whiskey, there's so much to know, even just around regulations, what you can and can't do. And I'm like, I'd be starting from scratch with rum. But that's not to say it won't happen at some point. I certainly think in terms of what I like to drink whiskey, I like to drink beer, I like to drink wine, and I like to drink rum. That's probably about it. So rum, there is definitely a natural kind of
progression. Yeah.
If you walk into a bar, what do you go for? What kind of whiskey do you look for?
Things probably something in a sherry cask, because that is a style of whiskey that I really like. There's been some interesting stuff. Arran have brought out some really excellent bottlings, whether it's the core range or the bodega. Glenallachie obviously is right up my street. I still love Glendronach 18-year-old is still my favourite. It's the one that I kind of have on tap at home, if you like. And I stocked up from the staff shop the week before I left the company. I made sure that I had plenty of the Glendronach 18. But yeah, things like I say, like Ben Nevis is good. Tamdhu is quite interesting for people that like that sherry cask influence.
Yeah.
But I have to say, guys, my days of walking into bars, even without COVID, few and far between over the last few years. More of a home drinker. Got a nice wee bar at home that's got all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff on it. So,
I think we've noticed that quite a lot as people, especially over the last 18 months or so, have either built a home bar with their time off, or they've kind of developed just a habit of sitting at home. And I've got for either side of the fence, I've got a pub as well as the shop.
All right.
We've noticed a different, people are drinking at home more. But I don't think it's new to COVID. And I think with the prices that are on the pubs compared to the prices you got in the supermarket, for example, younger people were tanking up at home before they went out.
Yeah.
That kind of has developed as they get older. They're now wanting to drink something a bit more specialist, a bit more premium, and now they're coming to a shop like ourselves to buy something nice to sit and not get hammered at home, but have a couple of pre-drinks and drink something nice like a single malt or a craft gin or something. And then when they go to the pub, they go back onto the cheaper stuff because it's cheaper. The palate's gone. They just want to get it. So there's certainly that kind of cycle of drinking at home, and I suppose as this same generation gets older, that staying at home will get more and more comfortable, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, my drinking outside the house tends to be more if I'm going for dinner. I love going to a restaurant, but then you tend to be drinking wine more than spirits. Maybe finish off with a whiskey at the end. The problem, I think, a lot of the restaurants maybe don't have the best whiskey selection. You might just have a handful of choices, whereas you need to go to a good whiskey bar to get a good dram.
Yeah.
There's a friend of mine from Mauritius who's just tuned in, Teelig Mahundus. He's from Reunion, originally, but he's living in Mauritius now. He was a nurse with me back in the health service a long time ago. So talking about rum, there's a lot of Mauritian rum on the go.
There is.
But Ross has got a lovely wee story there. He was saying he's tried a few of them. He loves the 7-year-old was the winner of the McNairs. He liked the peated one too. Hasn't revisited rum since his 20s for some reason or another. Thinking a few dodgy nights on the spicy Coke or something.
I don't even think spicy classes is rum, but it's enough to put everyone off.
That's what rum was back in the day, wasn't it? Yeah.
I see Andrew Smith saying you need to book your restaurant based on the whisky selection. Unfortunately, I live just outside Falkirk, so you don't your choices are quite choices are limited.
You know, you probably know Andrew from the Little Brown Dog.
No, I don't. But I've seen the Little Brown Dog all over social media. With the bottlings that they've been doing, seem to be getting a lot of attention.
They're doing some really good stuff. Their video. The acting, I think, in the videos needs.
I saw it. Was that the one, the video stealing the cask from?
Yeah.
That was good. That was good.
It was quite like I said, the whiskey's awesome. The wood is better for the cast than it is for the wood and acting anyway.
Oh, indeed, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll have to get Andrew back after his last release. We'll have to get him on for a blether. They're just
Indiana Smith.
Yeah, they're just absolute nuts. They're bonkers, both of them. But anyway, you've had your 5 minutes, Andrew. Stop hogging the.
Listen, Andrew was very brave when he came out because he was one of the first blethers we had, and he was in it.
Yeah.
Gosh, what time of year was it? It was spring, wasn't it? It was early spring, and it had been a really nice day. But he sat out in the field, just outside his house. It looked really nice to start with, but by the end of the blether, it was dark, and I think he was absolutely Baltic.
I must admit, I've been tempted to experiment with doing some of these things outdoors with the fire pit going. It's the technical midges, the Wi-Fi problems, then the neighbours saying, "Listen to that idiot sitting out in his back garden and talking rubbish."
He starts to mow his lawn at 8 o'clock at night. It is a risk, especially in Scotland, to do that. There's so many things that could go wrong. You just imagine this bird shit just landing on your head, just
or in your glass,
or in your even worse, in your glass. Yeah, I'm not sure if that could be classed as good luck.
Just imagine a nice, lovely Highland setting and a couple of deer going at it behind you. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I don't know where this conversation's going.
That's Andrew's fault. It's all Andrew's fault. Yeah.
So do you see yourself continuing as an independent now for the rest of your whiskey career? Do you think that's you settled? And
I think it's hard to kind of. The one thing I learned from my experience with Ben Riach, you never know what's coming down the road. I suppose in terms of what I'm doing, in terms of investing in stock, there's definitely a long-term component to that, and I think in whiskey you always have to think quite far ahead. If you're buying new make, you're looking quite far down the road. The flip side of that is that obviously in the background you've got Glendronach, which my old man keeps saying to me he's not getting any younger, and he's still in very good health for it. And my old man's like 77 or 78, and he's in great condition. Yeah. And I think he's got plenty of time to crack on with that project. But it could be something that I get involved in at some point. But I would still like to keep this going because I see this being part of my future. But it may not be the only thing.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because it's not like if you have a distillery, you're probably going to be approached by suitors that want to buy the distillery at some point. Whereas if you're an independent bottler, most people would only be interested in your stock and not necessarily your brand, if you like. You look what happened with Good Spirits Company a few years back. Good Spirits Company was sold basically for the stock, and the actual brand is kind of disappeared, which is a shame because it was a great brand. So yeah, long term, yeah, definitely keep going with this. But like I say, there might be other things that kind of crop up.
Yeah. No, it's.
Like you said, one of the things we spoke about, I mean, you're very kind to. I must get around to doing this blog, and I will do it at some point in time. Mike keeps giving me other jobs to do, but you were very kind to answer my questions at the start of the year, I think it was, Alistair. And I think you mentioned that one of the great things about being an independent bottler is just that variety that you get to do. And I mean, as much as it's going to be, it would be wonderful to be in charge of a distillery and all the projects you can get involved in. You're kind of tied to one brand, if you like, whereas as an independent bottler, you can do anything you want. And I think that must be really exciting.
It's certainly a lot more interesting when you're doing tastings.
Yeah.
And you've got multiple distilleries to deal with. We were quite lucky at Inverurie because we had so many different styles of whiskey. You could do a Inverurie vertical tasting, and the 6, 7 whiskies would be completely different. Glendronach was more difficult because there was such a big emphasis on a particular style of whiskey. So it was predominantly sherry cask, and then it was just more about how different is this one to this one. And I always found that was quite a challenge when you were doing a tasting. So independent bottlers have that benefit or advantage, if you like, of having access to so many different sources. Well, fingers crossed, you have access to lots of different sources. But that is definitely, and for me, it's been an education to work with so many different whiskies, whereas before you were only exposed to your own particular niche, if you like. But don't get me wrong, distillers really do have that is the holy grail, because ultimately they are masters of their own destiny in terms of what they make, how they make it, how much they make, what they do with it. As an independent, and any independent bottler will tell you this, the biggest challenge is the uncertainty. You don't know what you're going to get access to in the future. You don't know how much it's going to cost. So that's always out with your control. Although in the last 18 months, if there's one thing we should all be familiar with, is uncertainty.
Well, absolutely. No, that's right enough. I mean, we've spoken to a few other companies as well, and some people talk about the worry about getting liquid and perhaps maybe venturing into either building or buying distilleries to ensure an ongoing supply of spirit. Yeah.
It is a worry because you have no control over it. And there's always a temptation to kind of invest in as much stock as you can at the moment, but that's how you quickly run out of money and go bankrupt. So you have to kind of you have to resist the temptation sometimes to buy something that you maybe think is maybe just a bit too expensive, and sometimes you're better just closing your laptop and leaving that for 24 hours, and then you come back at it and think, right, I didn't buy it, that's fine, I don't need it. I've got something else. And in spite of that, there is that ongoing concern. There's always something that comes along. I mean, since 2018, we've regularly been buying parcels of whiskey, and there's lots and lots of things that we don't buy because they're too expensive or they're not right. But there's always something else that comes along that looks very interesting. So fingers crossed that I mean, it's such a cyclical industry as well that while there may be droughts in terms of availability of liquid now, you don't know what the situation is going to be in 5 years' time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there was a time not that long ago when distilleries were throwing whiskey at people, I suppose. So you never know if that'll come back again. Yeah.
And that's when the clever people, the old school boys like the Douglas Langs and the Gordon MacPhails and Signatory, etc. That's when these guys were making hay. But that was quite brave, because at that time they were buying, as you said there, Russell, they were buying stuff that people didn't want, and there wasn't really a market for it. But they thought, well, I'll get it. And they were probably going out and picking up Port Ellen and Rosebank and Springbank and all sorts of things at great prices. And now they've got those things sitting in their
Yeah.
warehouse.
Yeah.
And there must be an element of a great deal of foresight, but also an element of luck in that kind of decision.
Of course, yeah. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Phil's just asked there. I know we're kind of just over the hour, and we are after a couple of sessions where we ended up going into 2 hours. It was like, my God. So we want to try and tighten that up a little bit. But Phil's just asked about. We touched on rum and the kind of the future of potential new products. Would you consider doing a blend or maybe a core blend or something like that?
I like the idea of a blended malt. Blended whiskey, and this isn't meant to be condescending towards blended whiskey because there's a lot of expertise and there's some fantastic blends out there, but I'm more interested in the kind of malt area, whether it's single malt or blended malt. And I like what some other people have done. If you look at Berry Brothers is a good example where they've got a range with maybe 3 or 4 very, very affordable. I think there's like a sherry cask one, and there's a classic one, and
Skyside and an Isla. Yeah, they've got some really good stuff. Yeah,
and I think there's a few others that have done similar things like that. Maybe Morrison Distillers. I've got similar stuff in their portfolio.
Yeah,
I think there's a nice place there for a liquid like that you almost like a session, a high quality session dram that is always going to be affordable and replaceable. The challenge for me, and it's a project that I started kind of scribbling down what I wanted to do with it.
Hey, Paisley. Hey, Paisley.
Oh, but
like chat without a dog.
Paisley's definitely interested in this blend idea.
Yeah.
Well, it's one that I've kind of put on the back burner, but would maybe like to come back to it when time allows.
I love the sound of that. I think that's definitely something that I would want to go to. Adelphi came out with a blend as well. The Dancy Manny,
right?
Which is ridiculous, £23, and it's just one of those you would throw the cork around the fire with your mates and just throw the cork away and just happily just, as you say, just one of these session drams.
The problem is, I suppose, that there's maybe people out there already doing it better than I could do it. So, is there a place for another one of those? That's the question.
I would think there is when I'm looking at Mike while I say that, but I would certainly think there is. When it's something.
Yeah. It depends on where you're pitching it or who you're pitching it to. I think. Sorry, go get that. I think it would depend on the volume of what you have to buy in as a blend, and what you could sell it at. I mean, Morrison Distillers, they've got the Old Perth range, but they have their own distillery and their own facilities and things like that.
Yeah.
Depends if Billy would let you use the distillery to do your own blending.
Oh, that'd be a difficult conversation. I do like the idea though of if you're going to do something like that, you take a base spirit and then you do some wood management with it, because I don't see the point in buying an off-the-shelf product and just putting a different label on it. It's like the old, the Simpsons, where you've got Duff Light, Duff Special, but they all come out of the same. So I think if you want to follow the philosophy of what we're doing with the single casks, you would want to bring in a good quality spirit, but then do something with it, whether that's exposing it to virgin oak or exposing it to sherry cask or doing a mix and then putting them together. But as long as you're doing something that makes it different, now that obviously builds a bit more into the product in terms of cost and time, but also means that you've got something that is a kind of unique and not exactly the same as something that someone else has got. Sure. So it's something. It's the idea of having something that you'd always have stock of, as opposed to the way we work at the moment, where you do a batch and then it usually moves quite quickly, and then you just move on to the next one. But you then have that period of 2 months where you've got nothing in the warehouse, which is it's a nice model, but you can only go so far with it.
Yeah. It's interesting that to listen to somebody who's in the game as much as you are to kind of talk about the balance, because from the outside looking in, you think, oh, you just get a blend and bottle it and put it out. But, there's obviously a lot more to it than that. There's finding the right spirit and the longevity of it, the affordability of it. So it's that's good. One of when we had the tasting with you back during the height of the virtual tastings, the biggest thing that we got back and the feedback was about your honesty and how open you were to talk about everything in its
Too much.
Never too much. Never too much.
Mike, I always come off of these things and go to myself, what did I say? What?
To go back and watch it again, you're oh no.
There's always a couple of things where you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that.
No, I don't think you've said anything out of sorts tonight.
We're on the water and the Coca-Cola tonight, so we're okay, Alistair. I think it's
exactly that is the problem. See when you're doing a tasting and you're having a few drams, you obviously loose lips sink ships and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And inhibitions start to fade. It's funny because that's been an interesting part of the online tasting experience, because these things basically, I'm assuming they get recorded and they're available to watch on whatever platform at a later date. So whatever you say is there forever.
That's right, it's out.
In the old days, all right, 2 years ago, when you would go and do a live event, and you might get a wee bit drunk and you get carried away, but it's basically it's a one time. If you weren't there live, then you didn't experience it. So.
It's absolutely deniable. No, that never happened. I never said that.
Yeah,
everybody knows now that I used to shave my legs when I used to go cycling. So that's out there. That's out there. It's in the.
We have a rule on the private tastings anyway. Not so much on the live feed. That's once it's out, it's out. But on the Zoom tastings and all that, is they keep any secrets until the recording is off, and then you can tell. There's a couple of brand ambassadors we've dealt with, and they're all saying, "Now I can't tell." Okay, go on. I'll tell you, but don't tell anyone else. It's pretty
good. Wait till we're off record.
Get off, but people will stay behind for that chat, and find out the ins and outs. But because it wasn't recorded, unless they're sitting on their phone recording it,
yeah. I mean, that is what I do miss the in-person tastings, and that it was always quite good after the tasting as well, because normally you would be staying in a hotel somewhere because you're not going home that night, so the tasting finishes and then everyone goes to the bar, and before you know it, you've another 3 or 4 hours of it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're still going.
Some of the virtual tastings ended up like that as well, I'll be honest.
I have heard of this situation. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to take up any more of your Thursday night. We're an hour and a quarter in. Thank you very much for coming along and joining us. I want to know how I can get a table like the one behind you in my tasting room. That would be pretty.
Well, the table's from IKEA, but the whiskey's not.
Well, it's not.
It's the spirit. It's the spirit on top of these after.
I really need to tidy this up. I've got a whole project to do. It's just I can't. Some of these are things that I've earmarked for bottling, and I'm kind of like, if I move them from there, I'm going to forget what I've picked. So they need to just stay there. And there's a cleaner that comes in here once a week and is absolutely terrified to go anywhere near that part of the room. But I don't want to knock anything over. So I'm like, just leave that bit. It'll be fine. It's okay.
You'll get around to cleaning it yourself, I'm sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of thanks and the love in the room for people saying just excellent chat. So yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Alistair. And I think it's always a case of we need a part 2 sometimes. So we'll come back and revisit.
Definitely, we've only scratched the surface.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Well, thanks again, Alistair. Thank you guys for joining us for tonight. Next week we have another great guest. Russell, do you want to introduce? This is your catch.
Well, yeah, we've managed to get Mark Rainey along next week, so we'll.
I might have to tune in for that.
Yeah, you can join in as you want. Yeah, absolutely. We'll easily have you back again. So Mark's agreed to come along. So we'll talk all things terroir and Waterford, and maybe get a few stories about Brew Claddie as well. So we're looking forward to that one. Yeah, on our best behaviour next week.
Yeah. I think you to Andrew Smith for that one. Don't let him in.
Andrew's banned from next week. He's blocked. Yeah.
Yeah. Cheers again, Alistair. Thanks, guys, for watching. Cheers, Russell. We'll see you in the shop tomorrow.
No worries. Yeah, I'll be in bright and breezy.
Thank you.
Guys.
For your
Cheers,
weekend.
also. Thank you. Yep. Bye bye.
Good night.